Naruto stared down at him, waiting for the inhale, waiting for the flinch, waiting for the inevitable insult, the inevitable TCH, the inevitable proof Sasuke was just being dramatic. Nothing, no breath, no movement. The mirror prison felt suddenly silent, like the world had stepped back to watch what Naruto would do next. Something inside Naruto, something old, something caged, shifted. That familiar foreign chakra surged the way it always had at night, the cold pulse that kept him awake. But this time it didn't snap him into clarity. It snapped him into something else. His mind sharpened so violently it hurt. His body felt heavier and stronger at the same time, like a second spine had grown along his back. Heat crawled up his veins and poured into his muscles, drowning pain in raw power. The Senbon in his body rattled. His heartbeat thundered. Naruto lifted his head and saw his reflection in the ice. Not blue eyes, red, slitted pupils like a predator's. For a split second, he wondered with a detached, awful calm. Is this what they see when they look at me? Rage flooded him. Not loud rage. Not tantrum rage. A cold, suffocating rage that made everything else feel unimportant. His skin steamed where red chakra bled out of him like smoke. It poured off his shoulders, off his arms, crawling over him in a flickering cloak. The air inside the mirrors warped with heat, frost hissing away where his chakra touched the ice. Haku took a step back without meaning to. The masked shinobi had faced Jonin, had faced killers, had lived inside violence long enough to wear it like clothing. And still, this chakra made Haku's instincts scream. It wasn't just power, it was malice given a heartbeat. Naruto rose slowly, Sasuke's limp body lowering to the ground behind him with strange care, as if some part of Naruto still remembered kindness. Then he straightened, red chakra licking the Senbon embedded in him. They popped out, not one by one, all at once, pushed free like splinters from healing flesh. The punctures closed as if time itself reversed, skin knitting together with disgusting speed. Blood stopped, bruises faded, pain became distant. Haku's breath caught. What are you? Naruto's voice came out calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that promised something terrible. You're going to pay, Naruto said, and the words weren't shouted, they were delivered, like a sentence being read aloud. I'm going to kill you. Outside the ice mirrors, the bridge shuddered with that chakra wave like the structure itself felt it. Kakashi's head snapped toward the prison. The hair on his arms rose. His Sharingan widened a fraction, not in battle focus, in alarm. He knew that chakra. Every shinobi in the leaf did, whether they admitted it or not. The 9 tails, Kakashi breathed, and the word tasted like a memory he hated. He didn't finish it. He didn't have to. Zabuza felt it too. His grin twitched into something tighter. He wasn't afraid for himself. Zabuza didn't move through life afraid. But the sudden shift changed the entire battlefield. This wasn't two genin on the chopping block anymore. This was a beast waking up. Sakura, guarding Tazuna, stiffened as if someone had poured ice water down her spine. Her eyes flicked to the mirror prison, wide and scared despite her clenched jaw. Kakashi-sensei, what is that? Kakashi's breath turned harsh. His mind raced through the seal, the 4th Hokage, the 8 trigrams, the way Naruto had mentioned seals like he'd stared at them too long. No, not now. Please not now. He started toward the mirrors. Zabuza moved to intercept, sword rising. But Kakashi didn't look at him. Kakashi's terror was aimed somewhere else. He needed to end Zabuza immediately. Inside the mirror prison, Haku moved first. Not because he wanted to. Because he had to. Haku's hand snapped into seals, one-handed and desperate, and the mirrors flared brighter. His reflection multiplied. The moment Naruto's chakra rose, Haku understood something grim. If he didn't end this quickly, he might not be able to end it at all. Haku attacked in a blur that would have shredded Naruto 10 minutes ago. Naruto didn't even flinch. He turned his head slightly, like he heard footsteps in a hallway, and raised his arm. Haku's Senbon struck Naruto's chakra cloak and stopped. Not stopped by steel. Stopped by pressure, by density, by something that wasn't supposed to be solid. Naruto's hand snapped out and caught Haku's wrist. Haku's entire body jolted, like being grabbed by a vice. Naruto's grip didn't feel like human strength anymore. It felt like something that could crush bone just by thinking about it. This was nothing like the punch that broke his arm earlier. Haku tried to twist away. Naruto slammed him into a mirror. The mirror cracked. Not a scratch. Not a chip. A jagged fracture spiderwebbed outward, and then the entire panel exploded into shards of ice. The sound like 1,000 glass bells screaming at once. Haku barely recovered, sliding away to another mirror. using the prison's mechanics to escape. Naruto moved after him, faster than Naruto had ever moved. A red blur. The remaining mirrors trembled as Naruto's chakra boiled against them, frosting and melting in the same breath. Haku appeared in a new mirror and fired a spread of sunbon aimed for Naruto's eyes and throat. Naruto's head tilted. The sunbon missed, not because Naruto dodged, but because Haku's aim was suddenly wrong. The air itself seemed to bend around Naruto's chakra. Naruto lunged, fist driving forward. He didn't even use the compact, burst technique this time. He didn't need to. The punch hit the mirror, Haku's entry point, mid-transition. Haku was caught half in and half out. The mirror shattered, and Haku was thrown out of the prison like debris from an explosion, tumbling across the icy planks. He hit hard, skidded, caught himself with one hand. The broken arm remained tucked, protected, useless. The good hand shook. Naruto stepped forward slowly, red chakra curling off him like smoke off a furnace. Each step left the ice hissing beneath his feet. His eyes were still red, his pupils still slits, but something was different. His face was too blank, too calm, like rage had drained all expression away. Haku tried to rise, forcing his legs under him. Another set of seals, one-handed, frantic. Naruto was already there. Naruto struck Haku's hand aside and grabbed the front of Haku's mask with one clawed hand. Haku froze. The chakra in Naruto surged again, pressing outward like a roar without sound. Even Haku, trained to endure pain and fear, felt his body scream to run. Naruto lifted him half off the ground and slammed him down again. Not to kill yet, to dominate, to make the point unmistakable. Haku's knees buckled. The masked shinobi sagged, finally forced down into a kneeling position, head tilted up toward Naruto. Naruto loomed over him, breathing slow, eyes burning red. The mask's string had loosened in the impacts. It slipped, fell. The white faceplate dropped to the ice with a soft clack that sounded impossibly small compared to everything else. Naruto froze. His hand remained raised, fingers curled like he was about to tear something apart. His chakra flared once, violently, as if offended that he'd paused. Then Naruto's eyes widened a fraction, because the face looking up at him wasn't a faceless enemy. It was a boy, pale from cold. Dark hair stuck to his forehead, eyes soft despite pain. The same eyes Naruto had met in the forest. The one who'd spoken gently about people having precious things to protect. Naruto's breathing hitched. For the first time since Sasuke fell, Naruto's expression cracked. His eyes flickered, red to blue, blue to red, like his body couldn't decide which Naruto was real. Haku, kneeling, looked up at him with quiet resignation. Not fear, not begging, just acceptance, like this outcome was what he'd chosen the moment he decided to fight for Zabuza. Naruto's hand trembled. The rage inside him surged, screaming to finish it, to punish, to destroy. The red chakra licked higher, trying to pull him under like a tide. Naruto clenched his jaw until it hurt. He forced air into his lungs, forced his heartbeat to slow, forced his mind to lock onto something human. Inari's hug, Tuchi's smile, Irika's forehead tap, Hinata's shy kindness. The promise he'd made to himself in an empty classroom. Strength wasn't just fists. His eyes flickered again, red, then blue, clear and bright, like the sky had returned. The chakra cloak still steamed off him, but it steadied, no longer whipping wildly like a storm. Naruto stared down at Haku. Really stared, recognition settling into place like a weight. "It's you," Naruto said quietly, voice rough. "From the forest. Why aren't you finishing the job?" Haku asked, voice quiet enough that it felt wrong on a battlefield. "I am no match for you." Naruto didn't answer immediately. He stood there with the kunai in his hand, blue eyes fixed on the face he now recognized, really recognized. Not the mask, the person underneath it. The boy from the forest who had spoken about precious people, who had smiled like the world wasn't cruel, who had collected herbs as if their hands had never been meant for killing. Naruto's throat tightened. His gaze flicked once, past Haku's shoulder, to where Sasuke lay on the ice-slick bridge planks, still and bristling with sunbon like a pinned butterfly. Dead. That was the word Naruto's mind kept trying to stamp onto reality, over and over, like repetition could make it easier to accept. His fingers curled harder around the kunai's handle until his knuckles went pale. "I don't," Naruto started, and his voice broke on the first syllable. He swallowed, forced it down, forced his face to stop shaking. He couldn't afford to fall apart. Not here. Not with Sakura and danger still echoing in his memory. Not with Kakashi fighting for his life. Not with the bridge builder behind them, and an entire country depending on this stupid stretch of wood and steel. Haku waited. Even kneeling, even injured, he looked calm, like he'd already decided what his life was worth and accepted the price. Naruto's shoulders rose with a slow inhale. "You know," Naruto said, quieter now, the words coming like he was speaking to himself as much as Haku. "You're incredible." Haku's eyes softened in the faint light, but he didn't speak. Naruto stared at him, and the memory of the forest, warmth, quiet, the simple conversation, cut through him like a blade. He wanted to hate Haku. He wanted this to be easy. He wanted the rage back, the red fog, the demon heat that made everything simple. Enemy in front of you. Kill it, live. But his eyes were blue again. His mind was his own again, and that made this worse. "I know that conversation, our time, that was the real you," Naruto continued. He let out a shaky breath and then forced his voice into something harder. "Haku, don't forgive me. I don't want you to." The kunai lifted slightly. Naruto's stomach turned, his heart hammering like it was trying to crawl out of his ribs. He kept his hand steady anyway, because he needed to strike true and clean. That would be his final mercy. "Because I won't forgive myself either." Haku closed his eyes. Naruto moved in one fluid motion, fast, controlled, the way shinobi did when they couldn't afford hesitation. The kunai flashed once, cleanly. Haku's body went limp. For a second, the world didn't react. Then gravity remembered, and Haku slumped forward onto the frozen planks, blood pooling dark against the ice. The corners of his mouth held a faint, peaceful curve, like he'd gotten what he wanted all along. Naruto just stood there. He stared down at Haku's face. No mask, no mystery, just a boy about his age who should have been arguing about ramen and complaining about homework. Naruto's hand trembled. The kunai fell from his grip and clattered onto the ice. The bridge noises dulled. Mist drifted. Water hissed under the wind. And somewhere behind him, the fight between monsters continued. The moment the ice prison's chakra collapsed, the thick mist on the bridge began to thin as if something had been unplugged. Visibility returned in ragged patches. Kakashi and Zabuza were locked close. Too close for the executioner's blade to swing cleanly. Too close for anything but precision and brutality. Kakashi's left hand crackled with lightning, bright enough to turn the damp air blue-white. The sound wasn't thunder, it was sharper, more violent, like 1,000 birds screaming at once. "Chidori." Zabuza's eyes narrowed. He'd been smiling earlier. Now he looked tense in a way Naruto hadn't seen, like even he respected what Kakashi was about to do. Then Zabuza's gaze flicked, just for an instant, not to Kakashi, past him, toward where Haku had been. He felt it before he saw it. The sudden extinguishing of a chakra signature he knew as well as his own heartbeat. Haku's chakra gone. Zabuza's breath hitched. That 1 ounce of hesitation, less than a blink, less than a thought, was enough. Kakashi stepped through Zabuza's guard like a knife, finding the gap in armor, Sharingan burning red. His lightning-charged hand drove forward with perfect, merciless accuracy. It pierced Zabuza's chest. For a split second, Zabuza didn't react. His body locked around the intrusion like it couldn't believe it was real. Then the electricity surged, and Zabuza's arms jerked, sword slipping. Kakashi's face tightened. Pain and effort and exhaustion all wrung into one. He held it there for half a heartbeat, long enough to ensure the strike landed where it needed to. Then he yanked his hand free. Blood followed. Zabuza staggered backward, boots scraping, knees threatening to give. Kakashi raised his kunai, ready to finish it if he had to. But Zabuza didn't fall. Not yet. He swayed, hand clutching his chest, and his eyes, wild, furious, grief-struck, locked onto the direction of Haku's body. His willpower forced his legs to move when they should have stopped. Obeying, he took one step, then another, each one slower than the last, each one leaving a faint smear of red on the bridge planks. Kakashi's visible eye widened slightly. Zabuza didn't answer. He couldn't waste air on Kakashi. He reached Haku at last, collapsing to his knees beside him like the world finally took its weight back. His bandaged hand, trembling, lifted and brushed Haku's hair away from his face with something that looked almost gentle. Then Zabuza's shoulders shook once, like his body was trying to cough up a lifetime of violence. "I'm sorry," Zabuza rasped, the words strangled and raw. "Haku, I'm sorry." His forehead lowered until it touched Haku's. For a moment, the infamous demon of the mist didn't look like a demon. He looked like a man who'd lost the only person who'd ever cared if he lived. Zabuza's breath came out wet. His hand stayed on Haku's cheek, as if he could keep him here by touch alone. Then Zabuza's body sagged forward. He died on top of Haku, shielding him with the last thing he had left, his own weight. The bridge went quiet again, not from peace, but from shock. Naruto stood frozen a few meters away, stomach hollow, eyes wide. Sakura stared, hands shaking around her kunai. Kakashi's shoulders slumped a fraction, Sharingan still open, but his face, tight, pained, like the scene hit something in him he didn't want touched. For a heartbeat, it almost felt like the battle was over. Then slow clapping echoed from the far end of the bridge. A man stepped into view with a smug expression and expensive clothes that didn't belong in a poor country. Behind him, dozens of armed men poured forward, mercenaries with blades, clubs, and bows, spreading across the bridge like a stain. Gato. He looked at the bodies on the planks like they were trash. Well, Gato sneered, voice slick with contempt. So this is what I paid for? The demon of the mist, killed by a leaf ninja, and his little pet, dead too. His gaze flicked to Haku's exposed face, and his mouth twisted. Pathetic. All that power, and you still died for nothing. Kakashi's posture changed immediately. His exhaustion didn't vanish, but his intent sharpened, protective, urgent. Sakura, Kakashi said low, not taking his eyes off the mercenaries. Stay with Tazuna. Sakura swallowed hard. Kakashi-sensei. I know, Kakashi replied, and his voice was calm in that way that meant he was forcing it. He stepped forward slightly, putting himself between the mercenary line and his team. Naruto didn't move, not at first. He was staring at Zabuza and Haku like his brain hadn't finished accepting the shape of what he'd done. Like he could still hear the kunai drop, still feel the moment he chose to end a life. Gato laughed again. What's wrong? You leaf brats look pale. Don't worry, I'll handle the bridge builder myself after my men cut you all down. That was when Naruto lifted his head. Kurenai and Team 8 arrived at the bridge entrance at the same time the mercenaries spread out, having sprinted the entire way after sensing the chakra flare and the sounds of combat. Kiba's eyes widened at the bodies. Shino went still, insects shifting under his coat. Hinata's breath caught, pale face tightening with fear. Kurenai's red eyes tracked the battlefield instantly, assessing, counting, preparing to throw herself into the fray. Then she saw Naruto. He wasn't the loud boy from the academy. He wasn't even the focused, disciplined Naruto she'd been training in the mornings. He looked blank. His eyes didn't seem to be with the world anymore. His aura felt wrong, like heat without flame, like rage without words. The air around him seemed to press outward, making even hardened mercenaries hesitate. Kurenai's stomach tightened. Kakashi, she breathed, alarm creeping into her tone. Naruto. Kakashi's face hardened. He took one step toward Naruto, as if to stop him. Too late. Naruto walked forward, not running, not charging, walking, steady and inevitable, straight toward Gato and his army. Mercenaries moved to intercept. One swung a club at Naruto's head. Naruto tilted his shoulder and let it pass, the strike whistling through empty air. His hand snapped up and caught the attacker's wrist. There was a sharp crack, bone-giving, and Naruto shoved the man sideways into two others, using him like a battering ram. A blade came at Naruto's ribs. Naruto's kunai flashed, deflecting with a clean metallic ring. Then his elbow drove into the attacker's throat hard enough to drop him choking. Another mercenary lunged from behind. Naruto didn't even look. He shifted one step, and the man's own momentum carried him past. Naruto's heel hooked the back of the mercenary's knee, and the man collapsed. Naruto's kunai tapped his neck, just enough pressure to make the man freeze in terror before Naruto moved on. Some attacks he dodged like they were slow. Some he deflected with minimal motion. And some he didn't spare. A mercenary tried to stab him from close range, panicked, desperate. Naruto's eyes didn't change, but his hand did, fast and precise. Kunai slid in, then out. The man dropped, clutching his stomach, eyes wide with shock. Sakura made a strangled noise. Hinata's hands rose to her mouth. Kakashi's voice snapped. Naruto, stop. Naruto didn't hear him. Or he did, and it didn't matter. He kept walking. The mercenaries began to falter. Not because they suddenly respected shinobi, but because fear spreads faster than courage. Naruto's calm was worse than a scream. It told them there was no negotiation. No mercy guaranteed. Men stepped back, then stepped aside. A path opened unintentionally, like an instinctive bow to something dangerous. Gato's smugness cracked. What are you idiots doing? Kill him. Naruto reached him. Gato drew back, suddenly aware that money didn't stop a kunai. Why you? Gato started, and the word didn't finish. Naruto grabbed him by the front of his coat and slammed him into the bridge railing. Wood creaked. Gato yelped, "Hi." Ugly, terrified. Naruto's voice was low, almost gentle. "You like calling people pathetic?" he asked. Gato's eyes bulged. Get off." Naruto's fist drove into Gato's face. Not once, twice. Controlled enough to keep him conscious. Brutal enough to erase the smugness permanently. A kunai came down in a sharp motion, tearing Gato's flesh apart, his arm now loosely hanging on by a small bit of skin. Then Naruto hauled the man up like he weighed nothing and dragged him toward the edge. The river below churned darkly. Gato tried to claw at Naruto's arm with his remaining arm, sobbing now. "Wait, I'll pay." Naruto stared at him, expression still empty. Then he threw him. Gato's scream cut off as he hit the water, disappearing under the surface with a splash that sent ripples racing outward. Silence followed. The mercenaries stared at the river like they'd just watched their own future drown. Naruto turned away from them. They didn't stop him. They made space again, stepping aside without being told, letting him pass like he was some force of nature they didn't understand. Naruto walked back to where Sasuke lay. He knelt down. His hands hovered, unsure. The rage that had carried him here drained out in one long, sickening exhale. Then the tears fell. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent drops sliding down his cheeks and splattering onto Sasuke's blood-darkened clothes. Naruto's shoulders shook once, and for the first time in years, maybe since he was small enough that sleep was still a memory he could name, his body finally did what it had never been allowed to do. It shut down. Naruto slumped forward, forehead touching the planks beside Sasuke, and passed out. Hinata made a small broken sound and ran to him, dropping to her knees with trembling hands. Sakura sprinted to Sasuke at the same time, fingers already glowing green as panic surged through her. "Kakashi-sensei," Sakura shouted, voice shaking. He's not breathing." Hinata's hands hovered over Naruto's chest, terrified to touch him. "Naruto, please." The mercenaries, seeing Naruto fall, regained their courage in ugly little bursts. They tightened their grips. They started to move forward again, muttering, anger replacing fear. Then another sound rose, shouting, stomping, the clatter of makeshift weapons. Villagers, dozens of them, rushing onto the bridge with farming tools, poles, and blades they barely knew how to hold. At the front was a small boy with wet eyes and a fierce expression that looked too big for his face. Inari. He raised his weapon with shaking hands and screamed, voice cracking but loud. "Get away from them." The mercenaries hesitated, startled by the sudden human wave. Kakashi didn't. Kakashi's hands flashed into a ram seal, his visible eye cold now. Shadow clone jutsu. Smoke exploded across the bridge. Not 10 clones. Not 20. 50. Kakashi's clones poured forward like a wall, each one moving with Jonin precision, intercepting mercenaries before they could even pick targets. One clone slammed a man into the railing. Another swept legs and knocked 3 down in a chain. 2 more moved together, disarming blades and cracking joints with efficiency that wasn't flashy, just final. The mercenary line broke almost instantly. They tried to run. Kakashi's clones didn't let them. It wasn't a slaughter. It was a wipe. A lesson delivered with the force of a hurricane. Within minutes, the bridge was filled with groaning bodies and thrown weapons, the surviving mercenaries scrambling backward in terror as the villagers surged forward, suddenly brave because someone powerful had made bravery possible. Kurenai exhaled shakily, then forced herself to focus on the living. Sakura leaned over Sasuke, eyes wild. "Come on, Sasuke, please." Hinata's fingers finally pressed to Naruto's neck, searching desperately. She felt it, faint but there. A pulse. Relief hit her, so hard her eyes filled. Sakura gasped as Sasuke's chest gave the smallest rise. His lashes fluttered. His eyes opened, dazed, confused, and very much alive. Sakura sobbed, half laughing. "Sasuke." Hinata shook Naruto gently, voice trembling. "Naruto. Naruto, wake up." Naruto groaned, eyelids heavy like they weighed 100 pounds. His eyes cracked open, blue, normal, exhausted beyond anything he'd ever felt. Then that familiar chakra pulsed once more, his mind once again becoming crystal clear. The first thing he did was look for Sasuke. He found him sitting up weakly, still covered in sunburn marks and blood, staring around like he didn't understand what chapter of reality he'd woken into. Naruto's breath hitched. Relief flooded him so violently his vision blurred again. "Sasuke," Naruto whispered, voice breaking. "You're alive." Sasuke's brow furrowed, voice rough. "I think." Kakashi crouched beside them, face tight, and said quietly. Haku seemed to have used Senbon to induce a death-like state. Just like he did with Zabuza. Sasuke's jaw clenched, anger and humiliation mixing in his eyes. He looked past Naruto, and his gaze snagged on Haku's body, then on Zabuza's, then on the mercenaries scattered across the bridge. What happened? Sasuke asked slowly. Naruto opened his mouth. No words came out, because the answer wasn't just, I fought. It wasn't just, I won. It was, I killed him. And then, I killed more. Naruto's stomach rolled. He lurched to the side, hands bracing on the planks, and vomited hard onto the bridge, body shaking with it. Hinata flinched, but stayed beside him, one hand hovering near his back like she wanted to help, but didn't know how without making it worse. Naruto wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve, breathing ragged. His eyes were wide and too bright. He tried, voice hoarse. I didn't, Naruto did. In, out, in, out. He stared at Haku again, and his face tightened like he'd been punched. He was the boy from the forest, Naruto whispered, and the words came out like a confession. I met him. He wasn't just. Kakashi's grip tightened a fraction. I know, Naruto swallowed hard. Tears threatened again, but he forced them back, because he was surrounded by people, because he hated crying, because he didn't know what kind of person he was allowed to be after today. Sasuke said nothing. He just stared, silent, processing in that Uchiha way, locking it away behind his eyes so it wouldn't show. Kurenai glanced at Kakashi, then at Naruto, and she didn't speak either. Some things didn't need commentary. They needed time. The rest came like a slow exhale after a long-held breath. The mercenaries fled or were captured. The villagers, shaking, bruised, but standing, finally believed they weren't powerless. Tazuna wept openly, gripping the bridge rail like it was proof that his country might live. And later, when the bridge was finished, they named it after the boy who had turned fear into motion. The Great Naruto Bridge. Naruto stood at the far end of it when it was done, hands in his pockets, staring out at the water below like he was trying to understand how the world could keep flowing after everything that happened on its surface. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired and haunted. But when Inari, small, fierce, stubborn, stood beside him and said, voice quiet, thank you, Naruto didn't flinch away from the gratitude. He just nodded once and offered a small smile to reassure the child, like accepting it was another kind of responsibility. After a day's rest, Team 7 and their reinforcements headed back toward the Leaf. That night Naruto didn't train, he simply stared at the ceiling for. They left behind a country that could finally breathe, and Naruto carried something new with him on the road home. Not just strength, not just skill, but the heavy knowledge of what strength sometimes demanded. He didn't know yet how to live with it. The road back to the Leaf felt longer than it should have, not because the distance had changed, but because Naruto's head wouldn't stop replaying the bridge like a broken scroll. He had buried Zabuza and Haku's bodies the previous night, the executioner's sword resting in the ground like a tombstone. He walked with his hands buried in his pockets, shoulders tight under his jacket. The wind tugged at the orange leaf symbol on his back like it was trying to remind him who he was supposed to be. Every now and then his eyes would flick to Sasuke, quiet, pale, bandaged in places that made Naruto's stomach twist, and then away again before the knot in his chest could tighten. Sasuke hadn't said much after he'd woken up. He'd stared at Haku's body for a long time, jaw clenched so hard his cheek twitched. Then he'd turned his head, as if looking at it too long would carve the image into him permanently. The Sharingan had faded back into normal black eyes, but the afterimage of those Tomo still seemed to hang around him like smoke. Sakura stayed close to Sasuke by habit, but even she looked different now, quieter, more cautious, like she'd seen what it meant when the world didn't care about her crushes or her pride. She kept glancing at Naruto, like she wanted to say something and couldn't figure out how to shape it into words that didn't sound stupid. Kakashi led the group at his usual lazy pace, but the laziness didn't reach his shoulders. His posture was guarded, aware of every shadow in the treeline, every shift in the birds. Kurenai and Team 8 moved with them for the first stretch until the main road split toward Konoha and the path toward their own route home. Even then, Kurenai didn't leave immediately. She waited until she was certain they weren't being tailed, until she'd met Kakashi's eye and seen the same unspoken agreement there. The mission was done, but the consequences weren't. When Team 8 finally peeled away, Hinata lingered a second longer than the rest. Naruto noticed, because he was noticing things now. He'd trained his mind into it. but that didn't mean he knew what to do with it. Hinata's fingers twisted together at her waist. Her gaze flicked up, then down, and her cheeks reddened in that familiar way that used to make Naruto confused and now just made him careful. And Naruto, she started, voice thin against the wind. Naruto turned to her fully, forcing his expression to soften. Yeah, she swallowed. Are you all right? The question landed like a pebble thrown into deep water, small on the surface, heavy underneath. Naruto almost lied automatically. He almost gave her a grin and told her he was awesome, because that was what Naruto did. But his throat felt too tight for it. He tried again. I'm alive. Hinata flinched like the honesty hurt, but she nodded. That's good. Naruto's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Thanks. She hesitated, then bowed quickly, as if afraid she'd take too much of his time if she stayed. Please, don't push yourself too far. Naruto watched her go, the back of her jacket shrinking down the path beside Kurenai. For a moment, he felt something warm in his chest, gratitude, maybe, or relief that someone could ask if he was all right without looking at him like he was a weapon or a cold-blooded killer. Then the warmth faded, and the bridge came back. He remembered Haku's face, Zabuza's hand on his cheek, Gado's scream when he hit the water. He remembered the way his own hands hadn't felt like his. And he remembered the brief moment his body had shut down. Less than 2 minutes of darkness like a switch had been flipped before he'd snapped awake again with nausea and horror. Not sleep. Not really. Just collapse. A one-off. A crack in whatever kept him awake. The rest of the walk, Naruto kept his eyes on the road. They reached the gates of Konoha under a pale afternoon sun. The familiar sight of the village should have felt like safety. Instead, Naruto felt the strange sensation of walking back into a place that didn't know what he'd become outside its walls. The guards greeted Kakashi with respect, glanced at the genin with mild surprise that they'd returned at all, and then their eyes snagged on Naruto's face for a fraction longer than usual, as if trying to figure out why he looked older. Kakashi handled the formalities. Mission paperwork. The brief exchange about the bridge being completed, Gado being dead, the land of waves no longer under his grip. He left out the parts that didn't belong in a gatehouse conversation, the parts that would start rumors and fear and a different kind of attention. When the admin side was done, Kakashi turned and waved a hand like he was brushing dust away. Team 7, dismissed, he said lightly. Sakura looked relieved. Sasuke looked like he didn't care. They both started to move. Then Kakashi's visible eye landed on Naruto. Not a glare. Not a command. A look that said, stay nearby. Naruto didn't even pretend to miss it. He nodded once. Sakura hesitated. Naruto, are you coming? Naruto forced his mouth into something that resembled normal. I've got something to do. I'll catch up. Sasuke didn't look back. He walked away with his hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. Sakura followed him after a second, torn between wanting to fuss over him and not wanting to be left behind. Naruto watched them go. Then Kakashi's hand came down on the back of Naruto's jacket, not grabbing, not rough, but enough to steer him. Come on, Kakashi said quietly. Lord Third wants to hear the report in full. Naruto didn't argue. He expected it. He'd felt it like a shadow behind him since the moment his chakra had erupted on the bridge. They moved through the village streets. People glanced at Kakashi with that automatic shinobi respect. People glanced at Naruto with the usual discomfort. And Naruto realized with a faint, sour twist that none of them knew how close he'd come to becoming exactly what they thought he was. Maybe that was the most bitter part. They were wrong about him, and he was terrified they might become right. The Hokage's office smelled like ink, old wood, and smoke from the pipe Hiruzen hadn't yet lit. The old man sat behind his desk like a mountain that had been eroded by time but refused to crumble. Wrinkles deepened his face. His eyes were tired, but sharp. The Umbu's presence was subtle in the room. Naruto couldn't see them, but he could feel that pressure in the corners, that quiet watchfulness. Kakashi knelt and bowed his head. Naruto did the same, more awkwardly. Lord Third. Kakashi saluted the sage-like man who bore the title of Hokage. I've already received a preliminary report, Hiruzen said, voice calm. His gaze moved from Kakashi to Naruto, lingering just a moment longer than usual. But I want to hear it properly. Kakashi did what Kakashi did best. He spoke in clean lines. Facts. Sequence. Threat assessment. He described the Demon Brothers, the engagement with Zabuza, the appearance of the masked shinobi, the collapse of Kakashi due to Sharingan strain, the reinforcements arriving, the final battle on the bridge, and the resolution. He did it without embellishment, but the room still felt heavier with every sentence because the names alone carried weight. When Kakashi reached the point where Haku's identity was revealed, Naruto's stomach tightened. He stared at the floorboards, jaw clenched. Hiruzen's fingers steepled. "Zabuza Momochi," he murmured. "And Haku." Kakashi nodded once. They were both killed during the final engagement. Gato was eliminated as well. Eliminated? Hiruzen repeated, and his gaze sharpened slightly. By whom? Kakashi paused. Not long. Just long enough for Naruto to feel his heartbeat stumble. Gato fell into the river during the chaos. Kakashi said carefully. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the full story. The mercenary force scattered afterward. Hiruzen's eyes flicked to Naruto again. And the incident with that chakra. Naruto's shoulders went tight. He could feel his pulse in his throat. Kakashi's voice lowered a fraction. It happened inside Haku's ice mirror technique. Sasuke was struck down. Naruto believed him dead. Hiruzen's face didn't change, but the room seemed to chill. And then, Kakashi exhaled. Naruto's seal reacted. Chakra surged. It was intense. It allowed him to break the mirror technique and overpower Haku. Hiruzen's gaze didn't leave Naruto. Did it break the seal? Naruto's mouth went dry. Kakashi shook his head. I don't believe so. The seal held. But the pressure was significant. Naruto's chakra signature changed. His behavior became erratic and beast-like for a short while. There was no judgment in Kakashi's tone, but Naruto heard the truth anyway. You stopped being you for a while. Hiruzen leaned back slowly, pipe still unlit between his fingers. Naruto, he said, voice gentler now. Look at me. Naruto swallowed and lifted his head. Hiruzen's eyes were not accusing. They were tired, concerned, and underneath that, apologetic, in a way Naruto didn't know how to handle. Do you understand what happened? Hiruzen asked. Naruto tried to speak. His throat locked. He forced the word out. I got angry. That's not all. Hiruzen said softly. Naruto's nails dug into his palms. It felt like a wave. Like something inside me woke up and wanted to rip everything apart. His voice tightened, and I didn't want it. But it was there. Kakashi watched quietly, his single eye steady. Hiruzen nodded slowly. That is the Nine Tails chakra. It is not your friend. It will offer you strength because strength is a hook. Naruto flinched. Part of him wanted to argue that he'd used it to save his team, to save the bridge builder, to save everyone. But another part remembered how easily he'd hurt men who'd never even seen him before, how blank his eyes had been when he threw Gato into the river. He couldn't pretend it was clean. Hiruzen's voice deepened. Naruto, even though you broke free of the Nine Tails influence, you killed Haku. Naruto's breath hitched. He stared at the desk as if the wood grain might offer a way out. Yes, he whispered. Hiruzen didn't react with disgust. Didn't react with fear. He just closed his eyes for a moment like it pained him. You did what you thought you had to do, Hiruzen said quietly. But that weight will not disappear just because you don't look at it. If you pretend it doesn't exist, it will rot inside you. Naruto's jaw clenched. I don't want to rot. Then don't, Hiruzen replied. Silence sat between them. The kind of silence Naruto used to break with jokes and bravado, and now couldn't. Kakashi finally spoke. Lord Third, there's another matter. Hiruzen opened his eyes. Go on. Kakashi's gaze flicked to Naruto. Naruto has a condition. He doesn't sleep. Hiruzen's hand stilled around the pipe. Explain. Naruto's heart lurched. He'd known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made it feel real in a way he hated. Kakashi continued, measured. He claims he hasn't been able to sleep since he was very young. He doesn't grow fatigued mentally the way he should. Physical exhaustion affects him, but sleep does not come. Kurenai and I confirmed that he trains through the night consistently. Hiruzen stared at Naruto, expression unreadable. Naruto, is this true? Naruto's voice came out tight. Yes. How long has it been? Hiruzen asked, and this time there was steel under the gentleness. Naruto hesitated. I don't remember. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed slightly. 4, 5. When did you last sleep? It's important that I know these things, Naruto. Naruto's throat tightened. Maybe 3. I don't know. Kakashi added quietly. He collapsed on the bridge, but he insisted it wasn't sleep. More like shutdown. Less than 2 minutes. Hiruzen looked at Naruto for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly, as if the air itself weighed too much. You've been carrying more than any child should, Hiruzen said softly. Naruto's shoulders went rigid. He didn't want pity. Pity made him feel small. Pity made him feel like he had to prove something. I'm fine, Naruto said too quickly. Hiruzen's gaze sharpened. No, you are not fine. You are functioning. Those are not the same. Naruto flinched. Kakashi stayed silent. letting Hiruzen take the lead. Hiruzen set the pipe down without lighting it. Naruto, I will have you examined. Not as a punishment, not as a suspicion, as a necessity. Naruto's mouth opened, defensive words already forming. Hiruzen raised a hand. You will not argue this. Naruto shut his mouth, cheeks tightening. Kakashi, Hiruzen continued. You will report any abnormal chakra fluctuations immediately. Any signs the seal is destabilizing. Any signs Naruto is losing control. Kakashi nodded. Understood. And Naruto, Hiruzen said, voice soft again. You will not train yourself into the ground out of guilt. Naruto's eyes snapped up. I didn't. Hiruzen's expression didn't change. You did. I can see it. Naruto's throat tightened. The old man was too sharp, too accurate. Hiruzen leaned forward slightly. Listen to me. You are not a weapon to be used until you break. You are a shinobi of this village. You are a child of this village. Whether the villagers accept that or not, I do. I am the Hokage of this village, and I have a duty to look after the well-being of all the people that live here. The words hit Naruto in a place he didn't have armor. His eyes stung. He looked away quickly, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Kakashi's voice was quieter when he spoke again. Lord Third, Naruto's training has produced results. His discipline is unusual. If properly guided, it could be a strength rather than a liability. Hiruzen nodded slowly. That is why you will guide him, and why Kurenai will continue her mental training with him when possible. Naruto's mind must become a cage stronger than the Nine Tails' hunger. Naruto swallowed. I'll do it. Hiruzen watched him for a long moment, then softened slightly. Good. He paused. And Naruto, he added, you will speak to me again about what happened on that bridge. Not today, but soon. You cannot carry that alone. Naruto's shoulders tensed, but he nodded once. Okay. Hiruzen's gaze shifted back to Kakashi. You are dismissed. Naruto, stay a moment. Kakashi bowed. Yes, Lord Third. He rose and stepped aside, lingering near the door, but not leaving fully, just in case. Hiruzen waited until the room felt slightly less formal. Then he looked at Naruto like a grandfather rather than a Hokage. I failed you, Hiruzen said quietly. Naruto's eyes widened. What? Hiruzen's mouth tightened. I thought distance would keep you safe. I thought letting you grow without my shadow would make you stronger. I did not consider the loneliness as a wound. That was foolish. Naruto's throat tightened. He didn't know what to do with the apology. He'd dreamed of being seen for so long that when it finally happened, it felt like standing in sunlight after living underground. I'm still here, Naruto said, voice rough. Hiruzen nodded, eyes tired. Yes, and I would like you to remain here for a very long time. Naruto's mouth twitched, trying to find his usual grin. It came out smaller than normal. I plan to. I've got to take your job one day. Hiruzen chuckled softly. Then live long enough to become worthy of it. Naruto nodded once, sharp. I will. Hiruzen's expression warmed. Good. Now go. Naruto bowed. Yes, Lord Third. As Naruto turned, Hiruzen added one final thing, quiet, but heavy. And Naruto, what you did to protect your comrades was not wrong. However, do not let it turn you into someone who can only protect by destroying. Naruto froze for half a heartbeat. Then he nodded without looking back. I won't. Outside, the evening air hit Naruto like a cold slap. He walked for a while without direction, letting his feet decide because his head didn't know what it wanted. He passed Ichiraku and didn't go in. That alone would have shocked the old him. He passed groups of villagers and noticed how they angled their bodies away from him, like he might stain them if he brushed too close. He didn't care. Not tonight. He found himself on a roof without remembering climbing. The village stretched beneath him, lanterns lighting up, smoke rising from chimneys. People going home to beds they didn't have to fear. Naruto stared at the Hokage monument in the distance. Stone faces watching over everything like silent judges. His chest tightened. He remembered Haku's last expression. He remembered Zabuza's apology. He remembered the way the Nine Tails chakra had felt. Hot and good, but wrong all at the same time. He pressed a hand to his own stomach where the seal sat hidden beneath skin and muscle. He couldn't feel it physically, but he felt it in the way his thoughts had nearly slipped away. That couldn't happen again. Not like that. Not because he was scared of being called a monster. Because he was scared he might become one. Naruto exhaled slowly. He didn't have the luxury of stopping. He didn't have the luxury of collapsing under guilt and letting it swallow him whole. Not if he wanted to be Hokage. Not if he wanted to protect people without turning into a storm. His ninja way wasn't a slogan. It was a lifeline. I will never give up because that is my ninja way, Naruto whispered to the night. And then, because it was the only thing he knew how to do when the world felt too big, he moved. He trained. The old man could say what he wanted, but Naruto would not allow himself to stay at this level. He ran until his breath burned clean, and the thoughts in his head had to line up behind the rhythm of his feet. He punched until his knuckles tingled through the wraps. He drilled footwork until the rooftop gravel shifted into patterns under his soles. When his body screamed, he didn't stop. He adjusted. He found the line between pushing and breaking and stayed there. He wasn't trying to punish himself. He was trying to build something that wouldn't shatter when fear hit. A couple days later, a gathering was called. It wasn't announced to the village. It wasn't a public ceremony. It was the kind of meeting the Leaf held when it wanted to test its future without making a show of it. Jonin instructors, upper-ranked shinobi, and above them all, Hiruzen Sarutobi, watching with an old man's eyes that had seen too many wars and still chose to invest in children anyway. Iruka was there too, standing slightly off to the side, not as a Jonin, but as someone the village trusted to know what its rookies looked like before the battlefield sharpened them. His expression was tight, a quiet worry sitting behind his eyes like an itch he couldn't scratch. When the genin were gathered outside, dozens of young shinobi, some eager, some nervous, some pretending not to care, Hiruzen handled the opening words with calm authority, speaking about opportunity and growth and the honor of representing Konoha. But the real decisions happened inside, behind closed doors. In a room where the air felt heavier with rank alone, Hiruzen met with Jonin leaders and senior ninja. The Jonin sensei stood in a loose semicircle, Kakashi with his hands in his pockets and his visible eye half-lidded, Kurenai poised and calm, Asuma with a cigarette unlit between his fingers out of respect for the room, Guy standing too straight like he was ready to declare youth itself a weapon. Iruka stood near the wall, not invited to speak, but close enough to be heard if someone asked. Hiruzen opened the floor. The Chunin exams will be held in Konoha this season. Other villages will attend. The decision to nominate a team rests with the Jonin instructor, but the responsibility rests with me. Guy stepped forward first, enthusiasm barely contained. My team is ready. Their flames of youth burn bright enough to scorch the heavens. Hiruzen's mouth twitched. Team Guy is always enthusiastic. Asuma gave a low chuckle. Guy continued, serious beneath the theatrics. They have trained beyond the standard. They have the spirit to endure the exams and the discipline to learn from them. Hiruzen nodded. Noted. Kurenai's voice was measured when she spoke. Team 8 has the skill set suited for multi-stage exams. Tracking, reconnaissance, team coordination. They have been tested under pressure recently and responded well. Hiruzen looked at her thoughtfully. You believe they can handle foreign shinobi? Kurenai's red eyes didn't waver. They can. And the experience will strengthen them even if they fail. Asuma stepped forward next. Team 10 is ready. Shikamaru's tactical thinking is rare at that age. Choji has improved his endurance and confidence. Ino has sharpened her mind transfer control. They're not the strongest individually, but they're balanced. Hiruzen nodded slowly. Balance matters. Then Kakashi spoke, casual as if he was commenting on the weather. Team 7 will participate. Iruka's spine tightened. His mouth opened slightly before he stopped himself. Hiruzen's gaze sharpened. Kakashi, your team has been genin for less than 3 months. Kakashi shrugged one shoulder. Time doesn't measure readiness. Pressure does. Iruka couldn't hold it in. Lord Third, he started, voice tense. Hiruzen held up a hand. Speak, Iruka. Iruka swallowed. With respect, 3 of these teams have barely started their careers. The exams aren't academy drills. They're brutal. They can break kids. Kakashi's visible eye slid toward Iruka, not annoyed, just flatly honest. They've already been in fights that would break most Chunin. Iruka flinched anyway. Kurenai's voice softened a fraction. Iruka, your concern is valid. But sheltering them won't stop the world from coming for them. Asuma added, quieter. If we don't test our genin here, they'll be tested out there. Hiruzen listened, fingers steepled again. The old man's eyes moved across the room, weighing not just words but intent, experience, the shadow of future wars. Finally, he nodded once. So be it, Hiruzen said. Team Guy, Team 8, Team 10, Team 7. I will approve your nominations. Prepare them. And remember, this is not just an exam. It is politics. It is reputation. It is a message. The Jonin nodded in unison. Iruka's worry didn't vanish, but he bowed his head. Yes, Lord Third. Hiruzen's gaze lingered on Kakashi a fraction longer than the others, as if silently reminding him of the thin line Naruto walked. Kakashi's posture didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Outside, Naruto was training. Of course he was. He trained in the official grounds more now, not hiding as much. Not because he wanted people watching, but because hiding felt pointless when the next fight might happen in front of foreign shinobi anyway. He also couldn't stop thinking about the moment on the bridge when his shadow clone had dispelled and the memory had hit him like a burst of knowledge. Inari's scream, the thugs, the riverbank. He'd felt it instantly, like the memory had always been his and just needed to be unlocked. He'd known in theory that shadow clones returned experience. He'd used it in combat, sure, but he'd never studied it. Now he did. Naruto treated it like a science experiment. One afternoon, he had sat in his apartment with a scroll open and created a single clone. He handed the clone a section of dense Fuinjutsu script, symbols, explanations, warnings. Then Naruto himself stared at the wall and counted breaths, forcing his mind not to peek. After 20 minutes, he dispelled the clone. The knowledge hit. Not perfect understanding, not mastery, but the raw memory of reading, the faint imprint of the symbols, the way the text had felt. Naruto blinked hard. He opened his own scroll and tested himself. He could recall details he hadn't consciously learned. He could copy the strokes more accurately. He could even remember where his clone had struggled, which lines had blurred. His heart thumped. He did it again and again, with different subjects, different time intervals, different levels of concentration. He learned that the feedback came with mental strain. Too many clones doing heavy reading at once made the memories tangle, like trying to drink from 6 cups at the same time. But it worked. It really worked. Naruto sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just extra hours. This was multiplication, and it was dangerous, because if he could multiply growth, he could also multiply obsession, fatigue, and whatever instability lived under his skin. But Naruto didn't do well with don't. So he made a rule: fewer clones, clear rolls, short rotations, mandatory cooldown. Then he made another rule: clones could learn technique and knowledge, but the real Naruto would handle the physical load. Because muscle didn't transfer, pain didn't transfer, conditioning didn't transfer, only memory and skill imprint did, which meant if he wanted to be faster than Sasuke, faster than Haku, fast enough that his normal eyes weren't a disadvantage, he needed something physical that forced adaptation. That was when he went shopping. He walked into a specialty supply store that catered to shinobi training, weights, resistance tools, balance rigs, odd little devices designed by people who enjoyed suffering. The shopkeeper looked Naruto up and down like he couldn't decide whether to laugh or call security. Naruto leaned on the counter. "I need weights." The shopkeeper squinted. "For what? Wrist weights? Ankle weights? A training vest?" Naruto nodded. "All of it." "How heavy?" Naruto didn't blink. 75 kilos per limb. The shopkeeper stared. Naruto added, as if he was ordering ramen toppings, "and a 150-kilo vest." The shopkeeper's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Kid, I can pay," Naruto said, and slid a pouch onto the counter. The pouch was heavier than it should have been. Sealed storage scrolls bulged in his bag. The shopkeeper lifted it, eyebrows rising. "That's a lot of money." Naruto's eyes stayed flat. "So, can I get some weights?" The shopkeeper studied him for a long moment, then sighed like he'd decided not to argue with the walking bad idea in front of him. "Fine, but you tear yourself apart. Don't come crying to me." Naruto's mouth twitched. "I don't cry." The shopkeeper snorted. "Everyone cries." Naruto didn't answer. He left with the weights sealed into a scroll, the vest too, because carrying them openly would have been ridiculous even for him. He didn't tell Kakashi. He didn't tell anyone, not because he was hiding, because he knew what they'd say, and he knew he'd do it anyway. That night, he returned to the training ground after the village settled into sleep. He still didn't sleep. The brief shutdown on the bridge had been an accident. Shock, chakra, exhaustion colliding. It hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't changed the fact that when Naruto lay down, the tick inside him would snap him awake again. So he used the time. He formed the seal and created clones. 6 of them, each one stepping forward like a squad. "All right," Naruto said quietly, voice low in the darkness. "You know the rules." One clone grabbed a ceiling scroll and moved to a flat rock where he could write by lantern light. Fuinjutsu. One clone loosened his stance and began slow, precise taijutsu drills, forms and counters, the kind that built muscle memory without burning out the real body too much. Taijutsu technique. One clone sat with coins and wind control notes, fingers already glowing faintly with thin streams of chakra. Elemental ninjutsu technique. One clone opened a genjutsu text and began working through Kurenai's notes, visualizing triggers, rehearsing chakra bursts, and studying illusion theory. Genjutsu study. One clone opened a political and historical primer. Missions weren't just fights, they were contexts, and began reading about village alliances, shinobi law, and war history. Political, historical, logical study. And the last clone, quiet, eyes narrowed, began chakra control work. Leaf, coin, water surface manipulation. Microcontrol. Naruto watched them for a moment, feeling the strange tug of dividing himself like this. Then he focused on what only the real Naruto could do. He unsealed the weights. The ankle weights hit the ground with a dull thud that made the dirt jump. The wrist weights followed. Then the vest, thick, heavy, biting with metal plates. Naruto stared at it for a long moment. He remembered Haku moving like mist. He remembered Sasuke's edge and speed. He remembered his own frustration, the way his eyes couldn't keep up even when his mind screamed orders. Naruto lifted the vest and shoved it over his shoulders. The weight slammed down like a hand trying to pin him to the earth. His knees bent reflexively. His spine protested. His lungs compressed. For a second, he almost laughed, because the absurdity of it hit him. Then he stopped thinking and started moving. He began with walking. Slow steps. Controlled breathing. Let the tendons adjust. Let the joints learn the new truth. Then light footwork. Then sprints. The first sprint was pathetic. The vest dragged him down. The ankle weights made his steps feel like he was running through mud. His calves screamed after 20 meters. His ankles threatened to buckle. Naruto gritted his teeth and kept going. He wasn't trying to be fast tonight. He was trying to teach his body what fast would need to become. He moved through drills, explosive starts, sudden stops, lateral shifts, foot pivots. He practiced keeping his center of gravity low so the vest didn't throw him off balance. He practiced turning without losing traction. He practiced short bursts, because long runs with this weight would shred him before they strengthened him. When his muscles began to shake, he stopped, not because he was done, but because he had learned enough for one session. Then he dropped into slow, controlled punches, chamber, strike, retract, guard. Every movement heavier, every mistake punished. He could feel his body adapting in real time, not improving yet, but learning where it would break if he was careless. After an hour, sweat poured down his spine. After 2, his arms felt like they were filled with sand. After 3, his legs were trembling hard enough that standing still was harder than moving. Naruto peeled the vest off with shaking hands and collapsed onto the ground, chest heaving. He wasn't sleepy. He was wrecked, and that was satisfying in a way that scared him a little. Because if pain felt satisfying, the line between training and self-destruction could blur fast. Naruto lay back, staring up at the sky. Then he sat up again, because his eyes still bothered him. His eyes had been a weakness. He'd envied dojutsu, envied the certainty of seeing, perceiving. If he couldn't inherit a bloodline, he'd force adaptation. He pulled out a notebook and, under lantern light, wrote down the idea he'd been shaping in his head for days. Not in neat bullet points. In aggressive, messy Naruto handwriting that made it look like the page itself was being challenged to a fight. Using his medical ninjutsu knowledge, he made sure to get every fact right so everything would go smoothly. He wrote about chakra microcontrol, sending thin threads of chakra beneath the eyelids, into the optic nerves, not to create a dojutsu, but to strengthen what he already had. He wrote about widening attention, training peripheral awareness until it became instinct. He wrote about motion reading, not prediction magic, but the brain learning patterns, learning trajectories, learning micro-movements. He wrote drills for distance clarity, staring at carved seal marks on bark until he could read them without squinting. He wrote drills for reflex recognition, flashcards with seals shown for a heartbeat, forcing instant recognition. He wrote drills for peripheral catching, pebbles thrown from wide angles while he kept his head still. He wrote about using Jinjutsu as a training tool, Kurenai layering multiple moving silhouettes to overload the brain, forcing focus and anti-panic clarity. And he wrote something he didn't want to show anyone. They would think he was insane. He would feed chakra not just to the eyes, but to the processing part of the brain, temporal awareness, reaction speed, because seeing wasn't enough if you couldn't interpret fast enough. At the bottom, he wrote a final technique, idea, hand signs that would trigger a temporary perception state. Not a bloodline, not a stolen power, just a mode. A burst of heightened clarity for a short period. Tiger, bird, hare, monkey. With a question mark after. He circled it. It was a brief theory with not much to back it up, but that is what he had right now. It didn't matter anyways. He hadn't even started the first part of his training. He wasn't naive. He knew this would take months. Years, maybe. He knew he might never reach Sharingan level tracking. But he didn't need to match an Uchiha. He needed to stop being helpless. He needed to be able to protect without relying on the Nine Tails chakra. He needed a stronger mind, the conviction to kill again in order to protect those precious to him. The third Hokage's message still rang clear in his ears. He needed the conviction, but he must not allow that to become the default. Naruto closed the notebook. In the distance, he heard faint movement, the clones shifting, pages turning, quiet breaths. He stood up, stretched his shoulders, and returned to training. The next day, Kakashi gathered Team 7 with the air of someone who knew they'd get annoyed but didn't care. "You can enter the Chunin exams if you would like to," he said, simply handing out forms. Sakura's eyes widened. Sasuke's gaze sharpened. Naruto didn't flinch. He'd felt something like this coming, like a storm line on the horizon. Irika's worry from the private meeting wasn't visible here, but Kakashi's tone carried a similar caution. "This is not a game," Kakashi said. "There will be foreign shinobi. Some will be older. Some will be stronger. Some will not hesitate." Naruto's mind flicked to Haku. He nodded once. "I know." Kakashi's eye lingered on him, as if weighing whether Naruto truly did. Then Kakashi continued, "Train smart, not just hard. The registration is in 5 days." Naruto's mouth twitched. Yeah, Sasuke didn't speak. He too had been engrossed in training, refusing to fall behind Naruto. With his Sharingan now unlocked, he would grow faster than ever before. Sakura asked questions, rules, structure, what to expect. Kakashi answered what he could without turning it into a lecture. They all agreed there, and then that they would take part. When they were dismissed, Naruto moved immediately toward the training grounds again. He didn't even pretend to relax, because relaxing felt like letting the bridge happen again. That evening, Kakashi caught Naruto on the outskirts of the village, not in a dramatic way, just appearing beside him on a rooftop like he always did. Naruto froze for half a heartbeat, then sighed. "You're stalking me." Kakashi's eye smiled. "I prefer the term supervising." Naruto glanced sideways. "I'm not doing anything illegal." Kakashi's gaze dipped toward Naruto's bag. "What's in there?" Naruto's mouth twitched. "Stuff." Kakashi stared at him with the same calm patience he used when waiting for someone to confess. Naruto grumbled. "Weights." Kakashi's eye narrowed slightly. "How heavy?" Naruto hesitated, then decided lying would be pointless. 75 kilos per limb. 150 vest. Kakashi went very still. Naruto added quickly, "I'm not stupid. I'm ramping up." Kakashi exhaled. Naruto's gaze hardened. "I was slower than Sasuke. Slower than Haku. My eyes couldn't keep up. I'm not letting that happen again." Kakashi's eye stayed on him, unreadable. "You're trying to outrun fear." Naruto's jaw tightened. "Maybe, but fear's faster than me right now. So I need to get faster." Kakashi didn't argue. Not directly. He just said, "If you destroy your body, you'll be useless in the exams." Naruto's grin flickered. "Then I won't destroy it." Kakashi studied him for a long moment. "Fine, but you do it with structure. And you tell me when you increase the load." Naruto huffed, annoyed at being supervised, but not enough to reject it. "Fine." Kakashi's eye softened a fraction. "And Naruto, about the bridge." Naruto's stomach tightened. "Don't." Kakashi's tone remained calm. "You don't get to bury it. You get to carry it properly. I've been in this business longer than you, and I know how it feels." Naruto stared at the rooftops. The silence stretched. Then Naruto nodded once. "Okay." Kakashi let it go. For now, Naruto's training became even more organized. Not neat, not pretty, but purposeful. He used 6 clones in controlled rotations, short bursts, then dispel, then integrate. He learned quickly that memory feedback wasn't clean if he let clones diverge too far emotionally. The Genjutsu clone's nightmares could bleed into the political clone's history reading and make everything feel like war. So he compartmentalized harder. He made each clone keep notes in a different handwriting style and used a cool-down minute between dispels to breathe and separate the streams. He also learned something that surprised him. Technique improved faster when he studied it and practiced it. A clone reading about taijutsu theory helped, but a clone performing slow-form drills helped more because the memory came with kinesthetic detail and helped reinforce muscle memory. So he adjusted. He made the taijutsu clone do slow-motion form and counter-practice. He made the chakra control clone do micro-control drills until the fingertips burned. He made the element clone do wind chakra shaping until the paper sliced cleanly every time. He made the Genjutsu clone rehearse chakra bursts and recognition cues. He made the ceiling clone copy script until the lines stopped wobbling. He made the politics clone read and summarize, then write short mission briefs like a strategist. Naruto himself did weights, speed, endurance, and live sparring when he could. And his eyes became their own battlefield. He started simple, long-distance focus drills. He'd pick a tree far away and stare until he could read the smallest cracks in bark. He'd blink deliberately, forcing his eyes to reacquire detail faster. He'd shift focus from far to near and back again, training the muscles and the brain behind them. He trained peripheral awareness by tying thin strings with bells around him and moving without letting them ring. He'd have a clone flick pebbles from wide angles while Naruto kept his head forward, catching by reflex. He used flashcards with seal symbols and forced instant recognition. No guessing, no close enough. Then, when his eyes ached and his skull throbbed, he added chakra, not flooding, threads, thin, careful streams beneath the eyelids, like lubricating the muscles with energy. Then slightly deeper, into the optic nerve region, always stopping before it became pain. It wasn't a superpower. It didn't turn his vision into Sharingan, but it sharpened the edges of the world of fraction, and fractions mattered. Kurenai helped too, in her own quiet way. Early mornings, before the village woke, she'd trap Naruto in controlled Jinjutsu illusions, multiple silhouettes moving at once, overlapping paths, trying to overload him. Naruto learned to breathe through panic, to focus on one thread at a time, to recognize the Jinjutsu's feel and break it without flailing. Sometimes he failed and the illusion showed him Haku's face again. Sometimes it showed him Sasuke falling again. Naruto learned to break those too, not by pretending he didn't care, by accepting that he did and moving anyway. As the Chunin exam registration day approached, Naruto's body felt like a coiled spring. His mind felt sharper. His guilt hadn't vanished. It didn't. It sat behind his ribs like a stone, but he wasn't letting it stop him. He'd already promised, and Naruto Uzumaki didn't break promises, not anymore. He stood on a rooftop, vest weights sealed away, notebook open, lantern light flickering across the page where he'd scribbled his eye-training hand signs and his clone rotation schedule. He stared at the words for a long moment. Then he shut the notebook, tied his headband tighter, and whispered into the night. My ninja way is to never give up.